Today, I want to welcome Pietro Canestrelli. He is the founder of the law office of Pietro Canestrelli. He's also the author of America's Tax Defender. He was a IRS attorney, and now he's focused on helping business owners and taxpayers protect their hard-earned money. Let me put it a little more directly, something Pietro said in the green room. He said his job is to get the IRS out of your life as fast as possible and from a legal aspect, legal
Right.
approach. Pietro, welcome.
Hey, good morning. Great to be on.
Yeah,
Thank you for having me.
I've been looking forward to this, and we almost had to start a few weeks ago, and then there were some tech issues, and
Yeah,
I was so glad to see you back on the schedule and the chance for us to talk. And I'm not sure what you're going to bring, but let me kind of launch in with a story that from somebody I know. I have a mentor of mine,
hmm
um, has a obviously as a CPA, but he has a tax attorney that works for him as well.
right.
And the IRS
Smart man.
what's that?
Smart man.
Yeah. Well, the IRS showed up one day with an audit saying that he owed the IRS $40,000. He's like, "Oh, let me call my attorney." And his attorney came over and started sitting down with the IRS agent. And before he knew it when he owed the IRS $40,000, the IRS owed him $40,000.
Yeah,
And I think there was an IRS agent that went away crying that morning and was humiliated and mocked when he got back to the office.
yeah, yeah. That is what a tax attorney brings to the table. Taxes is really divided up into three sections. What we're used to is what I call tax compliance. That is preparing and filing correct tax returns, and that is a job of a CPA or a other type of preparer, an EA, that sort of thing. They do compliance and they do it very well. What a tax attorney does is really focuses on the other two areas. The first is proactive tax planning, meaning not the rush in December to buy equipment or a car to get the deduction, but to actually sit down with you during the year and map out strategies that could save you tens or even hundreds of thousands, sometimes millions of dollars in taxes, depending on your situation. If you plan and you do your business a certain way, instead of doing it A, you do it B, you could save a lot of taxes because there's all sorts of ways to do that within the tax code. That's perfectly legal, but you have to not make up stuff. You have to actually have planning and actually do the type of transactions you need to do. And then lastly, where I shine and where I come from and kind of the stuff I love the most is tax defense, tax controversy. And that is starts at the audit level, but that could be US tax court litigation, that could be federal court litigation, refund suit. That's when you really are arguing the law. And you have to, one of our main mottos in our firm is we change the asymmetry of knowledge about taxes into your favor. Remember, when you're sitting down with an IRS auditor, that auditor, she does this all day, every day, and she knows what to ask you to make you answer the questions and get the answers she wants. You probably haven't been through an audit. You don't know how it works. You want to get out of there as quickly as possible. You're very stressed. You're very scared. You think there might be issues that you don't want to talk about. So you're trying to get it done as quickly as possible and just tell her what she wants to hear. That's the opposite approach you should take. You should have a tax attorney that actually knows the law better than the auditor because these are trained attorneys. The auditors are not attorneys. They work out of handbooks. And when I was with the IRS, I helped prepare those handbooks. And I don't want to say they're a dumbed down version of the law, but they are a simplified version of the law because we're not
Mhm.
dealing with attorneys. And their job is to make an assessment. So they're going to stretch it any way they can to have you owe 40,000 at the end of the day. But a tax attorney is going to say, "Hey, wait a minute, you got the law wrong here, and look at this, and oh, it turns out there's a 40,000 refund coming." So yeah, I could. That happens in our business all the time.
As you're describing that, the thing that hits me is, I've kind of concluded if I'm ever being questioned by the police for any reason,
Yeah.
I'm going to say I want an attorney here
Yes.
because I
Right.
and it hit me as you're talking. It's like if you're ever going through an audit, it's kind of the same thing.
Yes.
They have a playbook, and sadly
Yeah.
we've seen, certainly within the FBI, it's not about innocence or guilt. It's about being able to get a conviction. They figure out how to get you to say things that leave you trapped, even if you're not guilty.
You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right in that they know how to do this. You have no clue. And if you could have somebody show up and in a lot of audits, our attorneys are the ones that are speaking to the auditor directly, meaning we have all the material, we have all the documentation that the auditor needs, and we're going to go through it with the auditor and not have the client, the business owner there. Now, we may have to get specific information from the business owner, but we don't want him sitting down and talking to the auditor. We
Well, I
want
could
to,
see scenes. I could see scenes where you're sitting there shoulder to shoulder with your client,
right,
and you're like wanting to put a gag on your client, say, "Shut up, quit saying that stuff."
right, right. And so I rather not even have them there. What the other thing is, if we bring is we could look at your what the IRS is asking for, and we'll know what they're getting at really quickly because it's pretty standard. It's substantiation of expenses, it's underreporting of income. Most audits are, I don't want to say simple, but those are the issues. Or they're looking at a particular complex transaction and whether you did it properly. So those are always the issues, and it's easy for us to diagnose where you're weak, where you're strong, how we're going to set the narrative with the auditor. Oh yeah, we might have, on this bank statement, it looks like we underreported income, but in reality, that it was a loan, it was some transfers, it really isn't taxable income. So we could, and I personally think auditors, for the most part, there are some holdouts, but for the most part, I think auditors prefer to work with us too, because we're speaking the same language, right? We know if they ask for something, they don't have to explain to us what they're asking for and why they're asking for it. So I think a lot of times now, sometimes they don't. Sometimes they get mad when the attorney shows up. But I think it's less, most IRS person, it's more about apathy versus, revenge or anger or anything like that. Most IRS, and I spent 6 years with the IRS, most IRS personnel, they just don't care more than they're angry at a particular taxpayer, or they're trying to get a particular taxpayer. Remember, it's the government. They don't get any bonus based upon how successful they are in the audit. They're supposed to do a good job, but and especially now with all the new hires they've had a couple of years back, these people aren't even really trained all that well. So I don't think the management is pushing them. So it really is, you don't want them to care. You want them to be in that kind of government bureaucracy state that they don't care about that particular. The worst thing is to insult them and be nasty to them. And I've had that cases where a taxpayer just flips out. Then we got to calm everybody down, and let's not scream and yell and cuss at the auditor. She's doing her job. Let's get a professional in to help you, and we'll get through this. Let's not take a 6 months process and drag it out to 2, 3 years and spend twice the money on it than we have to. Let's deal with it at their level, but in protecting your rights, and let's not blow this up into something bigger and uglier than it needs to be. If
I
you're a
think,
successful business owner, I'm sorry, if you're a successful business owner, one badge of your success is you're going to be audited.
yeah, yeah. And I think, I mean, that's a really good point. A badge of success. It's funny. I tell people years ago, I was with a company, we were marketing a new product for a semiconductor product for mobile phones.
Mm-hmm.
And the sales guys came to me and they said, Craig, the competition's saying horrible things about us to the customers. And I said, that's wonderful news. And they looked at me like I had two heads.
Mm-hmm.
And they were like, why do you say that's wonderful? I said, we've earned the right to be bashed.
Right.
And so what you're saying is if you're getting audited, that's a badge of success. That means you're
Yeah.
doing really well and you should
Right.
be proud.
You should be proud. You should be, this is part of doing business in the US. And the other great thing is you do have a huge amount of rights, more than any developed country, let alone underdeveloped country. You have a huge amount of rights as a taxpayer in this country. And now exerting them is the key. And having the right people to do that for you is the key.
I want to jump back to something you said a minute ago about not getting emotional and not getting bombastic. And I just think that's good advice all around.
Yeah.
It's, I mean, I know it works in the movies where somebody yells and screams,
Yeah.
but I think on this side of the silver screen in real life, I I think it always works out better when you can dial down the emotions rather than dial up.
Right. That's not going to, ultimately a tax court judge is going to make a decision on a case, and tax court judges are not interested in yelling and screaming and pounding tables. No, nobody is. And yeah, it makes for great television, but it's all about facts and numbers and narrative and legal analysis and pointing out stuff. And do you really want to go to trial? And one of the advantages a taxpayer has in court is that they can't, they're ethically bound not to take crazy stances, really aggressive stances in the law. But we can. If we're representing a private party, a taxpayer, we can take legal stances that are a little bit off the path, so to speak, that we think we could convince a judge. But the IRS is bound by their decisions in the past, and they're not supposed to be vindictive and have these new legal theories that they're going to use against you. So that's another advantage that a taxpayer should be using. And I don't understand the table pounders. I've had in my past, I've had some private litigation, like in probate, where the guy was extremely aggressive, and it didn't get him anywhere. I wasn't intimidated by him because he was talking, aggressively. I was like, you're just wrong, and I don't understand why you're taking this position. Are you trying to intimidate us? It's not going to work. So I don't understand it either. But some people go to that. I think it's a tactic, but it's not going to work on me.
Well, I remember the worst I was ever chewed out ever.
Hmm.
And let me just give some framework. I spent 6 years in the Marine Corps. I know what a chewing out looks like.
Yeah.
But the worst I ever got chewed out was by a senior director at Siemens over in Germany.
Hmm.
And he used three slides that just ripped me to shreds. I had, in context, I had I worked for a guy that would go promise things to the Germans that he knew at the time we couldn't deliver. And my job
Right.
was to go tell the Germans we weren't going to deliver it.
Oh,
And and they were, I have to say, the Germans, they were wonderful people. I really enjoyed working with them. They were very gracious towards us.
right.
But this guy, Josef Bauregger, came in, and in 3 slides, it was funny. When he walked in the room, the rest of the team, you saw him like sit up in their seats. I mean,
Right.
the guy commanded respect. He
Right.
came in, he was just so nice. He's like, sorry to interrupt. Do you mind if I give a short presentation? I'm like, well, of course, Mr. Bauregger. And in 3 slides, I've never felt like I wanted to crawl under a rock more. He didn't
Right.
yell, he didn't scream, he
Yeah.
just presented the facts. Slides 1 and 2 were, on this day you promised this, but you did this. On this day you promised this, but you did this.
Right.
Slide 3 was, here's what we expect from our suppliers. It was all calm, it was all reasonable. I've
Yeah.
never felt so crummy in my life.
Right. Right. Yeah, exactly. That's the way to go. That's the way to present a tax case. This is why you are wrong. Factually, here's the facts that you got wrong, and here's the documentation that proves it. Legally, this is why you're wrong. Here's the code, here's case law. You're wrong about this. And this is how you present a case. And I'm not trying to have a pissing contest about it. It's just this is what it is. We could get it done at this stage, or we could go to tax court, we could go to appeals. It's up to you. We're not going to accept this audit.
Yeah. Let's pivot a little bit. One of my frustrations has been that I'm the one going to my CPA saying, "Hey, I heard about this tax
Yes, yes,
strategy." He's like,
right.
"Oh yeah, that's out there." I'm like, "Why am I telling you?"
Because his business model, and I have enormous respect for CPAs, but CPAs and other preparers, they do compliance. That is their business model. Their their business model is I'm going to make a portfolio of returns I file every year, and I'm going to have a high retention rate. I'm going to have a retention rate of 95%, and I'm going to get X amount of more returns every year. So I'm going to build my business till I'm doing, a couple thousand returns every year. I know how much money I'm going to make. I know I'm going to have to work really hard in March and April, and then take a month-long vacation in May, and then work really hard in extension season. I know I could build a business and be extremely successful doing that. I am not interested in doing proactive tax planning because that is something that I'm going to have to take time and effort. It takes a huge amount of time and effort to learn how to file those tax returns and report the taxes correctly in all the different forms and all the nuances to that. There's a lot of nuances. You could take a deduction here, or you could take a deduction on this part of the return. A lot of nuances, a lot of updates every single year that you have to learn. So I'm not really interested in doing proactive tax planning. And this is probably 90–95% of CPAs are not interested in doing this, because that means I have to learn a whole nother thing. And how am I going to charge my client? Am I going to charge him more for the return if I do this? And how do I know if the client is actually doing what he needs to do to take this deduction? So that's where tax planning with a tax attorney comes in that we meet with you at least quarterly during the year. Some clients we meet monthly. We make sure they're on track to take the research and credit, development credit, to do a cost segregation study on their building. All those things you need to be doing during the year. The CPA is not interested in monitoring. He doesn't know how to monetize this, doesn't know how to charge for it, doesn't know how to set. He doesn't have the system set up where you have an attorney assigned to each one of these clients who's doing this regular cadence of meetings, who has that list of deliveries, already did the analysis of what we're going to do this year, has that list of deliverables that were given to the client, and then that the client has to give to us and we're making sure everything is happening correctly, and we're checking where he is tax wise during the year. Now, you're still going to owe about $100,000 of taxes. Maybe we'll think about doing this in the third quarter, and that'll lower it. Oh, you're having an even better year. Fourth quarter, let's look into some, oil and gas credit investments, that sort of thing.
Mm,
You have to pay for that. You remember, you're paying for your return,
right.
and the the preparer wants to do your return every single year because he knows his margin on that return and he makes money on it. He doesn't know how he's going to make money doing tax planning. So, yeah, you need a tax attorney is going to be a lot more helpful in this situation. Now, some CPAs do proactive tax planning, but not many. Not as many as you think would be doing.
No, and that's been a big lesson for me. Let me ask this. What are a couple examples of tax strategies that most business people should be using but probably aren't?
Well, I just mentioned a couple of them. One is the research and tax credit with in the OBBB, the one big beautiful bill, the tax provisions. The research and development credit is really worth 3 or 4 times what it worth before that bill became law. And most business owners don't realize that they probably qualify for at least a relatively small credit. Most people think research and development is for high tech firms or manufacturers, but construction, medical, even like service based companies may be eligible for research and development credit. And that's a dollar for dollar tax credit versus a deduction. The other thing that I don't know why more people don't know this, but the cost segregation on real estate. And that's when you buy an investment property. It could be commercial, it could be residential. And instead of having that 42-year depreciation schedule, you could segregate the cost between the real estate and the personal property, like fixtures and carpet and that sort of thing, and get front load the deductions, the depreciation deductions. And that is something that if you're investing in real estate, you really should be doing that. And the nice thing about cost seg, you could really time that deduction for a year that you have income to offset. So those are two that people don't take enough advantage of, especially the R&D. The R&D is a lot broader than most people think.
Yeah.
And now the problem is most of the R&D specialty shops that focus on this, they're not looking for the small, what I call the small business owner, which is $1 million of revenue to $5 or $10 million of revenue. They're really looking at the $10-20 million businesses, and they're marketing towards those guys because they know that there's going to be huge credits in that. So, but we're as part of our tax strategy, we have a lot of tools in our toolbox to help be as tax efficient as possible. And R&D and cost seg are certainly really great tools.
So let me ask this. What is the most salacious tax deduction you've ever seen or salacious tax strategy?
Let me tell you what tax strategy is, how to do it wrong. And that is, and this happens all the time because we represent these clients, that is, I'm going to owe a lot of taxes this year. I'm going to pretend I didn't make as much income. And I'm going to pretend that I have a lot more business. I'm going to guesstimate my business deductions. And that is things that you always have the personal trying to be pushed into the business as a business expense. The trips to Cancun, and you could go to Cancun. Make sure there's a convention there
Yeah.
that is part of your industry. You could go to Hawaii, you could go to Vegas. There's all sorts of conventions all over the place. Make sure that it's part of that and that you're spending time and you're actually logging in the time of what and grab the brochures of the convention, the seminars you had to sit through, between pool time. You could push those into business, but when you're, a lot of the one here that I cringe because I see this on TikTok and other social media is like in California, we have a use tax. We have a sales tax and a use tax, meaning if you buy equipment from another state and you're using it in California, you owe use tax to the California authorities. And a lot of people are like, I live in California. California has a really high vehicle license. So what I do, I go to Nevada, I buy my vehicle there, I pay, 25% of what California is, and I bring it here, and it's like, you do know you sign a penalty of perjury against perjury statement on your income tax returns for California saying that you didn't do this. And then that if they ever audit you, you owe taxes and penalties. This is illegal what you're doing. It is not legal. So stop telling people to do this.
Do you know what state is one of the top states for registering exotic vehicles?
Probably Texas, maybe. I don't know.
Montana.
Oh, of course. Yeah. Yeah. That makes sense. They probably charge, $15 for sure. I'm like California. I know for a fact when my oldest son moved to Florida, his registration it went from like $700 in California to 150 in Florida. Same vehicle, a year older, but yeah, there's huge savings. But my son actually lives in Florida. He
Yeah.
doesn't live in California. You got
Yeah.
to follow the rules. And yeah, you could pretend that the rule doesn't exist, but it will catch up with you one day.
Yeah.
They're very aggressive here in California. They have their rules and they have a lot of resources to enforce those rules. And
Yeah. And if you're a billionaire, you just move to Texas or Florida, which they're doing.
yes, yeah, there's a huge exodus. There has been for a while, but now with the proposed wealth tax, a lot of people are shifting. And long term, long term, anyone who can move, why pay, 10 to 13% more in taxes than you have to?
Yep.
If you could live in Florida or some other state that doesn't have an income tax, why do that? Why not? Florida has beaches too. Texas has beaches sort of too.
Yeah, our beaches suck. I haven't been down the South Padre, but our beaches suck.
Yeah.
But no, there's a podcast called the All In Podcast,
Yeah.
and two of the members of that podcast have moved to Austin in the last year. A
Yeah.
third is meeting with a broker trying to find a property here in Austin.
Yeah. But
And
you actually have to move. You can't, buy some real estate in Texas, but still live in California and just pretend that you live in Texas. No, you have to actually move because the California Franchise Tax Board is not going to take your word for it, shockingly. And they're going to want you to show, the receipts.
well, Pietro, let's wrap up by talking about your book, America's
Yes.
Tax Defender. Tell me a little bit about that book.
Yeah, it
Hold it up a little
is.
higher, a little
Oh,
bit higher.
there
There
you
we
go.
go. Cool. What's it about?
So it is a book, and it really highlights my time with the IRS as a young attorney starting out. as an IRS attorney in Washington, D.C., and kind of contrasting that with the way we practice law in my firm. And, the IRS, my time with the IRS, very educational, learned a lot about taxes. I think the people I work with were awesome people. I liked them a lot. Intelligent, smart, but the system is so government, so bureaucratic, so non-rewarding doing a good job, not punishing of doing a bad job. It was kind of soul crushing. I did not like it. And the other thing, I was not helping anyone. When you're writing regs and, helping in litigation, you're not helping anywhere. You're helping the government, I guess, in theory, but the government never says thank you, or you saved my life, or you saved me so much money and now I can have my life back. And, I don't have to move to Texas now because you saved me so much money. And I didn't realize I needed that when I first started out, but I hated working for the IRS. I don't think they're evil, but I do think that for me, it wasn't rewarding.
Mm.
Having that individual that, is, a lot of our clients, they have a huge tax bill because something happened in their life, meaning they got a divorce, they have substance abuse issues, and they went downhill and they have this giant tax bill. And now they want their life back, or their fiance wants to marry them, but not their tax bill. And helping those type of people get their life back is so hugely rewarding. Helping business owners that this audit could destroy our business if it goes bad, and being there for them and making sure that, hey, we're going to mitigate the damages of what this is, and you're going to be able to still run your business at the end of it. That is so rewarding. The IRS and other taxing agencies, they just don't care. That's not their function. And it's nice that, we practice law with passion and compassion, educating and advocating for our tax clients every day. And that is such a rewarding thing in it of itself, and just helping people. One of the stories from my book is that kind of highlights what goes on at the IRS is the head of our division. One time he needed a new secretary, so they picked the secretary with seniority, Miss Sally. Miss Sally was 80 years old. She's the sweetest lady, but she really had no desire to actually work, and nobody thought that was a problem. So she just kind of sat at the big desk, and they had to bring in another secretary from one of the branches to do her work while she read her Harlequin romances all day. And
Wow.
nobody thought that was the least bit weird, or what can we do? They figured out a workaround, and everybody was happy, and Miss Sally got her paycheck every 2 weeks. And it was like, to me, that, business as a business owner now for 10 years, it's like, that is so insane that they're willing to do that. But that's government.
Yep.
That's government.
Well, this has been really fascinating, and I
Yeah.
feel like we could talk for hours.
Yeah.
Pietro, how can people reach you?
Yeah. So I have a website, and www.ietaxattorney.com. IE, Inland Empire. That's the part of California I'm at. And then my book is available on Amazon. Just search America's Tax Defender or my name, and you will find it.
All right. Well, thanks for coming, Leaders and Legacies.
Well, thank you for having me.